The Veyrath Academy of Arcane Sciences was, by any reasonable measure, the most prestigious institution of magical learning in the known world. It had 17 towers, for interdimensional libraries, a greenhouse that existed simultaneously in 3 climates, a student body drawn from 43 species across 6 continents, each paying tuition that could have funded a small war. It had one janitor. His name was Ronan. He was 41 years old, broadly built in the way of someone who had spent 2 decades doing physical work without thinking of it as exercise, with calloused hands and a quiet face, and the particular unhurried competence of a man who had long ago made peace with the fact that the world runs on people who show up and do the unglamorous thing without being asked. He had worked at Veyrath Academy for 19 years. In that time, he had mopped floors that had been transmuted into 17 different materials by accident. He had cleaned up the aftermath of no fewer than 43 catastrophic experiment failures. He had, on one memorable occasion, removed a sentient ink stain from the ceiling of the 3rd Tower Library using a technique he had developed himself, involving vinegar, a specific chant he'd picked up from an overheard lecture, and patience. The senior faculty occasionally nodded at him in the corridor. The students, by and large, looked through him. This was fine. Ronan had never needed to be seen to know what he was doing. The Academy's eastern courtyard contained a reflecting pool. It was an aesthetic feature primarily, a long, still rectangle of enchanted water that mirrored the sky and made the approach to the main lecture halls feel appropriately grand. The water was deep, 12 feet at center, the depth maintained by the same enchantment that kept it perpetually clear and calm regardless of weather. On a Thursday morning in early spring, during the 40-minute window between the end of Ronan's pre-dawn corridor round and the arrival of the first students, something fell into it. He heard the splash from across the courtyard. He was there in seconds, not running, exactly, but moving with the focused efficiency of someone whose body had learned over many years to cross distances quickly without making a production of it. The hatchling was small. Dragon young, maybe 3 weeks out of the shell, based on the size and the still soft quality of the scales. Pale green, translucent at the edges, the color of sea glass held up to sunlight. She had clearly come from the adjacent creature studies building, through a window someone had left unlatched, drawn by the mirror shine of the pool's surface the way young creatures are drawn to anything that looks like it might be interesting. She was not, it turned out, a natural swimmer. She was thrashing, wings half spread and waterlogged, which was making everything worse. Head going under, coming back up, going under again. Ronan went in after her. The water was cold enough to knock the breath out of him for a half second. He found her, got one arm under her midsection, got her head above the surface, and towed her to the edge. Lifting her out was harder than expected. Waterlogged wings are heavier than they look. But he managed it, and set her on the stone lip of the pool, and pulled himself out after her. She was, for a moment, completely still. Then she coughed, a small, explosive sound, and retched up approximately half the pool's volume and began to breathe. Ronan sat beside her on the cold stone, soaking wet, getting his own breath back. The hatchling lifted her head. Her eyes, gold, enormous for her face, the pupils narrow vertical slits, found him. She made a sound. Small. Questioning. "You're all right," Ronan said. He didn't reach for her, didn't crowd her, simply sat, wet and patient, and let her understand at her own pace that the immediate danger was over. She studied him for a long moment with those gold eyes. Then she crawled onto his lap, turned in a circle twice with the universal instinct of small creatures establishing comfort, and went to sleep. Ronan sat very still. He was going to be significantly behind on the morning floors. He sat there anyway. Her name, he learned later that morning when the creature studies professor arrived in a state of barely contained panic, was Alara. She was the ward of Veyrath Academy, a rare case of a dragon egg donated to the institution by a family unable to provide proper care, with the intention that she would be raised in the creature studies program, educated alongside the students, eventually take a formal role at the academy as a resident magical creature consultant. It was an arrangement that had worked well for previous wards of other species. Alara, the professor explained, was proving somewhat independent-minded for the program. "She keeps getting out," the professor said, standing in the doorway of Ronan's supply room, where Alara had refused to leave, and was currently occupying the center of his workbench with the authority of someone who considered the space already claimed. "We've reinforced the windows twice." "She went for the pool reflection," Ronan said. "You might want to put something over it when she's loose. She's young enough that shiny flat surfaces probably look like sky to her." The professor blinked. That's actually quite astute. "Also, she's cold," Ronan added. "Her scales have been standing up since I brought her in. She needs a heat source." The professor looked at Alara. Alara looked at the professor. Then Alara very deliberately turned her back on the professor and curled tighter on Ronan's workbench. The professor left to consult with colleagues about what to do with a dragon hatchling who had apparently selected her own guardian. The next 8 weeks were, by any external measure, unremarkable. Ronan did his job. He mopped the floors of 17 towers. He cleaned the laboratories. He removed a second sentient ink stain. Different color this time. More aggressive. Possibly the same entity having learned from the first encounter, from the ceiling of the 5th tower map room. Alara accompanied him. This was not, technically, approved by the Creature Studies Department. It was also not, technically, disapproved, because every attempt to separate them resulted in Alara making a sound that the department's sound measuring equipment classified as structurally concerning until Ronan came back, at which point she stopped immediately and looked smug. The faculty learned to work around it. Alara rode on his shoulder when she was small enough, and walked at his heel when she wasn't, and watched everything he did with the focused, cataloging attention of a creature who was, whatever else she might be, clearly extremely intelligent. She watched him fix the broken seal on the 3rd tower's drainage channel, a job that had been on the work order list for 2 years because it required lying in a very small, dark space for a long time, which no one else had wanted to do. She watched him talk a first-year student down from a panic attack in the corridor outside the examination hall, sitting on the floor with the student and speaking quietly until the shaking stopped. She watched him spend his lunch break repairing the chair of the elderly groundskeeper whose hands had gotten too stiff to manage it herself. Nobody asked him to do any of these things. He just did them, the way he did everything, without announcement, without waiting for acknowledgement, without adjusting his behavior based on whether anyone was watching. Alara watched all of it with her gold eyes. She was learning something. The event that the Academy would later refer to in its official records as the incident of the spring examination period began on a Wednesday. The Veyrath Academy's Grand Examination Hall was a vast, domed space on the ground floor of the main building, capable of seating 300 students simultaneously. During the spring examination period, it ran 6 sessions a day for 2 weeks. The enchanted examination papers were sealed with a ward that prevented any magical interference. No spellcasting, no telepathy, no external assistance of any kind. What the ward did not account for, because no one had ever thought to account for it, was a structural failure in the hall's eastern drainage system. Ronan had flagged it. He had flagged it, specifically, 8 months ago, in the formal maintenance request system, under the heading of Eastern Hall Drainage. Blockage developing, recommend inspection before spring term. The request had been received, filed, and placed in the queue behind 17 other items, 6 of which were aesthetic rather than structural, and had not been acted upon. The blockage became a failure at 9:17 on a Wednesday morning, in the middle of the 3rd examination session of the day. Water, cold, and coming fast, began flooding the examination hall floor. 300 students. Examination papers. 6 faculty proctors. Water rising. The emergency response protocol was clear: evacuate, contain, call the Academy's contracted structural enchanter, wait for assessment. The evacuation happened. The containment wards went up around the hall. The structural enchanter was contacted and confirmed available in approximately 4 hours. For hours. With the Eastern Hall flooded, the afternoon examination sessions would have to be canceled. Students who had traveled from other continents. Students who had family obligations, medical accommodations, scholarship deadlines contingent on this specific sitting. The cascade of rescheduling would take weeks. Ronan looked at the flooded hall from the doorway. He looked at the maintenance schematic he had been carrying in his head for 19 years. He looked at his toolbox. "Stay here," he told Alara. She did not stay there. She followed him into the water. The drainage system's main blockage was in a chamber beneath the hall floor, accessed through a service hatch behind the east wall. The chamber was not large. The water was now knee-deep and still rising. The blockage itself, a calcified accumulation of mineral deposit and debris from the unchecked drainage channel he had flagged 8 months ago, was visible and significant, and would have taken the structural enchanter approximately 40 minutes of careful spell work to dissolve safely. Ronan was not a structural enchanter. He had, however, spent 19 years maintaining a building full of them, and he had a particular habit that the faculty had always found slightly peculiar. He listened to lectures when his work brought him near them. Not to learn magic. He had no gift for it, but because understanding what the people in the building were working on helped him understand the building. He knew what the blockage needed. He also knew he couldn't produce it magically. What he could do, and what he proceeded to do, in knee-deep cold water, with Alara watching from the hatch above, was work. He worked for 2 hours and 40 minutes. He used the physical tools he had. He used the understanding of the system he had built over 19 years of being the person who actually looked at it. He used, at one point, a technique that he had developed for the calcified mineral deposits in the third tower's lower pipes, adapted and modified for the scale of this problem. At 11:43, the water began to recede. By noon, the hall floor was clear. By 12:30, the examination sessions had resumed. The headmistress came to find him at the end of the day. Ronan was in the supply room, changing into dry clothes, which was taking longer than usual because Alara had chosen his dry jacket as a sleeping surface and he was reluctant to move her. The headmistress was a tall woman with the sharp, assessing eyes of someone who had spent 40 years identifying which students would amount to something. She stood in the doorway and looked at him. "The structural enchanter reviewed your work," she said. "All right," Ronan said. "He says it's better than what he would have done." Ronan considered this. The calcification pattern in that system responds better to mechanical disruption than magical dissolution. Magical approach tends to leave a residue that rebonds. "I've cleared this building's pipes long enough to know what takes." The headmistress was quiet for a moment. "You filed a maintenance request," she said. 8 months ago." Another silence. "I owe you an apology," she said. "The Academy owes you an apology. That request should have been acted on." Ronan looked up from the jacket Alara situation. The headmistress was not a woman who apologized easily. He could see what it cost her, and that it was genuine, and that she had come here herself rather than sending someone, which told him something. "It's a big building," he said. "That's not an excuse." "No," Ronan agreed. "But it's a reason. And now you know the drainage system better than you did this morning." Alara opened one gold eye. She looked at the headmistress for a long moment with the specific evaluating gaze she had been using on everyone since she first looked at Ronan on the cold stone lip of the pool. Then she made a sound, low, brief, the particular sound she used when she had decided something. The headmistress, who had a great deal of experience with magical creatures, went very still. "What did she say?" she asked quietly. Ronan had been learning, slowly, imperfectly, the way he learned everything, by paying attention over time. He had learned enough. "She said," Ronan replied, pulling his dry jacket carefully out from under a dragon who was heavier than she looked. "He does that." The headmistress looked at Alara. Alara looked back with her gold, knowing eyes. "She means," Ronan continued, "that this is what I do. Every day, the thing nobody noticed until something flooded. He finally got the jacket free. She's been watching for 2 months. She noticed." The headmistress stood in the doorway of the supply room for a long moment. Then she said, "I'd like to schedule a proper review of every outstanding maintenance request. With you. Starting tomorrow." Ronan nodded. "I'll bring the list." The list, as the headmistress would discover the following morning, was comprehensive, organized, prioritized by urgency, and had been maintained meticulously for 11 years. Waiting for someone to ask, Alara curled on Ronan's shoulder as he finished the last of the evening rounds, winding through the quiet corridors of the Academy's 17 towers. She was bigger than she had been 2 months ago, growing fast, the way dragon young do when they're healthy and well settled. She made a soft sound as they passed the Eastern Examination Hall. Dark now, still, the floor dry. Ronan paused. "You saw all of it," he said. She bumped her head gently against his temple. He stood for a moment in the dark corridor of the most prestigious magical academy in the world. Then he picked up his mop and finished the floors and went home. The academy's maintenance log for that year contains a single annotation in the headmistress's handwriting. added to Ronan's 8-month-old drainage request. Actioned late. Will not happen again. Below it, in smaller writing. The building runs because he shows up. We should have known his name sooner.